They used to have little rest stops in heavily forested areas where travelers could spend the night no charge or anything. There was a single dormitory with a couple of beds, and anyone could just set their luggage down and go to sleep, and leave the next morning. There was no reception or catering, just a building where you spend the night. These buildings were important, like really important, to have in these forests. Once a month, a local priest would be called to consecrate the buildings. Maintenance of these structures was on the lower end, but the consecration happened without fail every single month. In October of 1973, my mother fell really ill, and I had to travel to a neighboring village to take care of her. She was all alone, and I had to get there ASAP, so I set out even though it was evening. No one owned any cars, so I had to rent a carriage. The village road wasn't paved or lit. My lantern was the only source of light I had. My friends warned me not to pick up any hitchhikers, since they often tried to lead you off the path and into the woods. Do not leave the road under any circumstances. I was instructed, and I was smart enough not to test this. As the evening turned to night, I desperately hoped to find one of the rest houses. But then I saw her. She was standing right off the path with her hand raised and her thumb out. A hitchhiker. It wasn't uncommon to see one on this path, which is why no one left after dark. My lantern lit her up as I passed by. She looked like she was holding something in the other hand, and didn't have any shoes on. I tried to avoid eye contact and held my breath as I passed her by. She tried to walk towards my carriage. I couldn't see her face, but her movements told me she was desperate. I didn't stop, and forced my horses into a brisk trot. She didn't give chase, and I thanked God I didn't have to go faster. Accidentally losing a wheel due to this stony road, and being stranded here was not something I wanted. Finally, after what seemed like hours, I saw a rest house. Good. Great, I can spend the night safely, I thought. It was dilapidated and empty. I tethered my horses to the shed area and entered. God, this place smelt. I left my luggage in the carriage and made my way to one of the beds, placing my lantern beside it. I refilled its oil and locked the door. It was big and had a heavy wooden latch, for good reason. I lay down and tried to sleep, but then I saw her again. She was pacing outside. I could see her through the grated window, holding something in her hand. The same hitchhiker, but she didn't dare enter, and she couldn't as long as the consecration held up. I scattered some salt by the windows and doors as an extra precaution, and it instantly turned black. This was bad. Really, really bad. I moved away from the windows and stood absolutely still while the hitchhiker paced outside, her bare feet creating muted thuds on the soil. I looked around the room, and then I noticed it. There were cracks on the walls, and the entire place reeked. But the worst part was that the Latin incantations were absent. This wasn't a rest house. No, they'd never risk it. This was a duplicate, created to lure and trap idiots like me who wouldn't bother paying close attention. I rushed towards the shed. It was interconnected to the structure by design. This place was structurally the same as a rest house, but it wasn't. My horses weren't there. And then I saw her face. She had a child in her arms, and she looked just like my mother. I knew in that moment that my mother had passed. This wasn't a hitchhiker. Mother had been trying to warn me since I first saw her on the path.